I want to welcome Angela Healy. She is the CEO of Avenue West to the podcast this week. I was contacted by your team about coming to talk about midterm rentals, which is what Avenue West does. And I was just saying to you before we started that in all of my years, I guess I've come across them as executive rentals. But considering how big Airbnb is as another, like, so this is a midterm rental, we'll get into that and we'll give you the ability to explain it. How popular Airbnb is, or short-term rentals, for example, it's really quite surprising how there isn't more big players in the midterm rental space. So I'll let you take it away. I'd love to understand how you got into it as the CEO. Did you start the company or you run it?
I do own the company. But I got into real estate at a very young age. My parents owned rental property when I was growing up, starting at age 7. And I really saw how they were able to develop wealth through the real estate process. And the more hands-on they were with the property, the more they were able to yield income or higher income from the property. So there's definitely kind of that point of, are you trying to maximize ROI, or are you trying to have less hands-on and that
Right.
sliding
That it is,
scale of what
forget
you
it.
do? Hmm.
I
Absolutely.
always say to clients, who think come to me about investment properties, the one big question I always have is like, do you want to be a landlord? Because that's really what it comes down to. The rest of it is hold on to it and you'll make money. But do you want to be a landlord? Because if you put it onto a property management company, you have a whole other conversation. But anyway,
Yes.
a
Yes.
very good point. And by the way, the reason I asked you was because everyone brings to market or invents or creates what they need themselves, right? So it doesn't surprise me that you have a real estate background. Your parents were in real estate, they owned, so you saw that niche, if I'm understanding that correctly.
That is correct. But my original dream was to be a banker. I always wanted to be the banker. Monopoly was my favorite game, and so I did. For 10 years I was a commercial lender, which gave me a whole nother side of the industry and everything that had to go along with it as well, from the lending aspect. But then ultimately, I think my dream was really pulling me to get back into real estate. And so Avenue West, we focus on what I think is the undiscovered sweet spot in real estate. So everybody knows about Airbnb and the short-term rentals and the turns and all of the work associated with having those kind of rentals, the potential damage, or people doing parties, what's going on in the rental. And then they know the other side, the unfurnished, year-long tenants, who, sometimes aren't the best tenants. They may have had a job when you put them in there, but by the time they're moving out, maybe they don't anymore, or their circumstances changed, or they had a health issue. A lot of times it's just health issues, and the healthcare costs just really eat up anybody's real
Yes.
savings. And
Yes.
so you could have a beautiful experience that then turns bad. My husband, Tim, and I, we had unfurnished rentals, and every time somebody moved out, it was, do I need to replace the carpet? Do I need to change the blinds?
The
Did
answer
they
is always yes.
Yeah, yeah. Did they take the closet doors off? It was just these like 5 things that always seemed to happen every time somebody moved out. And it's kind of everyone thinks, oh well, I get income for a year, but then how much do you have to put back into it every time someone moves out? Is it a full month's rent? What are those costs that you don't always
If you're
consider
lucky. If
when you're
you're lucky,
penciling?
for sure.
Hmm.
I always say, I've had clients come to me about, should I sell it, or should I put a renter in it and kind of ride out the market? And I'm like, you choose for it to be a long-term income rent, like property, or don't, or sell it. Because if you think you're going to ride out 1 year and make all this money, which by the way is taxable, and then you're going to have to paint it for sure and repair something for sure, carpets are the worst for sure. So yeah, if you're lucky, it's only 1 month's rent. And then what have you really, like, what did you net after the year? And then on top of it, your time, right? What's your hourly rate, right? Like everyone forgets that.
Yes. And so what we have found, and today's buzzword is more midterm rentals. So it's 30 days plus rental of a fully furnished property. So it takes the Airbnb fully furnished piece, but also adds a longer term to it. And what we're finding is that the corporations that we work with, they need these properties. One, they don't want the Airbnb because it's so unpredictable.
So
Did you get
unpredictable.
one that actually looked like the pictures or that isn't falling apart? And do you have a host that is really on the spot and answering your questions or your needs? So as a corporation, we're providing a turnkey product. So it has to be perfect. Only about 1% of the properties actually meet what we would consider the midterm criteria. It has to be very close to the corporate center. It has to be fully furnished with no personal belongings in it whatsoever. And, and it has to be decent furnishings. I mean, it is a rental, so you're not going to put in a $20,000 couch, but it
No,
has to be
it needs to be
decent because,
clean and
yeah,
yeah, no, for
clean is a
sure.
very important piece. And the corporations rent them from us on a month-to-month basis. So they're paying a premium for that month-to-month flexibility. So you're going to make more than you would from an unfurnished perspective. You may make less than you could on a really high performing Airbnb. If you're actually renting that property almost every day of the month, that is what I consider very high performing Airbnb. Are you really in an area that is driving enough tourism that it's not just, oh, I have 3 nights here and 2 nights there. And when you finally total it up for the whole month, you really only had 10 nights rented. So if you only have 10 nights rented, we can certainly make more than that. But
What would you say, like your biggest challenges when vetting people who want to be part of your system, right? Because these are not your properties. We're going to confirm. So you don't own them. I'm Rachel Levy. I own an income property and I have a condo that's in a building that allows short-term rentals. So in Canadian real estate, short-term is anything under a year, or some of them have less than 6 months. So allow Airbnbs. And I come to you, what are you, like, do you have someone on site that will come and inspect them? So you actually have someone boots on the ground.
yeah, so we do a conversation first because obviously it takes a lot of our time to go out and actually do the inspection. So we have kind of a checklist of things that it must have. It's got to have parking. And in northern environments where it snows a lot, that really needs to be covered parking. It can't just be, oh, they have a space outside and every time 10 feet of snow comes in, it's covered. It has to have washer and dryer in the property. It has to, be fully appointed. It can't be a 20-year-old unrenovated property. It has to be up to today's standards. Typically with a condominium, you're looking at, does it have a doorman? Does it have the 24-hour security? Is there a gym? Is there a pool? What are the amenities that go with it? And then how close walking distance is it from corporations that are going to need that type of property? And that's probably one of the biggest things I get is someone's like, oh, I've got a beautiful property and it's only 30 minutes away from, XYZ corporation. And that's about 25 minutes too far. And that's the hardest thing for people to swallow is that they're just not close enough to the property. There's also some stigmas against, like baseboard heating or, does it have air? We have properties in San Francisco that don't have air conditioning. And are those really up to
It's your
date, up to
standards.
standard?
Yeah.
Just because in San Francisco you need heat more than you need air conditioning, but it's the climate's starting to turn, and you're
Really?
starting to see where there's about maybe a week every year where you need that air conditioning because we're having a heat wave. So every city's different, but each local Avenue West realtor knows what is needed, and we'll walk you through that process.
Interesting. And so, who would you say your client, like who's your key clientele then? Do you find that you work a lot with like location, like HR people who are bringing people in to that are that are transferring offices or that type of thing?
So we do work with a lot of corporations everywhere up. I mean, it doesn't even have to be. I mean, certainly, Microsoft, Google, those guys are all very big users. Oil and gas is very big users. Healthcare, traveling nurses, traveling doctors. Just some other industries off the top of my head. Insurance is a big one. So if someone loses their home, like what we're going to be talking about in LA, that is another big user of corporate housing. Anyone who is relocating or is going on a temporary assignment. So like the traveling nurse might be going for the 90-day assignment, and they just kind of move place to place every assignment.
I think it's great for clients, and as mentioned to you, I was working with clients who had just moved, or the husband had just been offered a transfer to Toronto, and the company had put them into a rental. So he's in there for a year. I got introduced afterwards. But if they'd been introduced to me first, I mean, my first always is you never jump into a city and buy something. You have no idea where you're going to live, what your life will look like, what your neighborhood, if you're not familiar with it. But having that ability to have something that's shorter term so that, let's say they find something in a few months and they have to eat rent or they have to delay because, they're in a rental that they don't love, but they don't want to eat 6 months worth of rent, then. So you started talking about San Francisco. We were in the right state. So let's go to California. Let's talk about the LA fires. As I said, when your team reached out to me and you guys have boots on the ground and it was what really drew me, aside from your fascinating company, to get a real firsthand report on what's happening with the housing crisis that's happening in LA. We've got horrid fires happening. People have lost their homes, burned to the ground. Listen, whether they're celebrities or not, they're still homeless. And I hear that there's new fires starting. So it's not over. So yeah, please tell us what you see, what's been going on. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, it's absolutely far from over. The initial fires are a certain amount contained, which is good news. But then, like you said, new ones started up yesterday or the night before. And so they are still very much in a danger area. I mean, they have those high winds. It's just very dry there. And they don't have a ton of water at the moment, which is, hard to believe. But yeah, that's the situation that they're in. And unfortunately, when a large area like this gets burned to the ground, we had this happen just outside of Boulder. I guess it's been almost 2 years now, where we lost 1,000 homes in a fire there within a matter of like 3 hours.
Oh my God, that's horrible. When did
Yes.
that happen?
When did that happen? It was right around New Year's. I think
This
2 years
past year,
ago.
like a month ago?
No, 2 years
Oh,
ago.
okay.
So they're all rebuilding. They're finally getting back to some sense of normal. And actually, when I was on a lot of the chat sites for the LA fires, lots of people from that area were sharing their experiences with the people in LA, because it is very hard. It's one thing if you were the only house that had the fire and your insurance company comes out right away, and there are plenty of houses around you where you could go in and have a new rental. When you have such large devastation, especially when things like the schools got burned down. So now you're not just thinking about, okay, I just need a temporary rental. You're thinking about, well, where's my child going to go to school, and where's this temporary rental in comparison to where that school is? And, our initial first week, we're out helping people finding properties. And then all of a sudden, that area where we were about to sign leases went under an evacuation. So it was
Oh my
really
God.
happening very real time. And so I think letting it settle just a little bit is useful. I know Airbnb
Sorry
had
to
put out
interrupt
a
you.
note.
So basically, you had rentals for these people, and then the fire moved over or got close enough that those were in risk and they got evacuated. So you couldn't even find a stable neighborhood to place these people.
In the initial couple of days, yeah. And then Airbnb had put out a notice that, they were going to give away a week's free rent. But then as we went on to Airbnb to try to match some of these people with properties, we were finding that a lot of those property owners had changed their minimum. So they were no longer doing nightly. They were now doing a year minimum. It's,
Capitalizing on, yeah.
yeah, and it's hard to, if you were the property owner and you have the ability to rent for a year, you're going to want to rent for a year. But unfortunately, a lot of these people cannot make a year decision just yet because the insurance adjuster hasn't gotten out to their property and hasn't told them what their monthly allowance is for rent.
Because
So,
there's just so much volume. Is that why?
yeah,
Like there's just so
yeah.
many, they can't handle it?
Exactly. So typically what they do is they'll fly adjusters in from other areas of the country so they can tackle it. But it's just still too fresh and they just haven't gotten out to everybody to be able to give them dollar amounts of, okay, you're going to be able to spend this. And then we were looking at one property. It was normally renting unfurnished for 12,500. And then there were so many applicants that came in, they declared a price increase to 28,000 per month. So we were seeing
Oh
significant
my
price
God.
increases.
So people are taking advantage. I mean, I get the supply and demand, but I mean, that feels not good. Like just for humankind. I'm sorry. That just, what a shame. What a shame.
So it's definitely been a roller coaster. And I'm sure, I didn't lose a house, but we've been trying to help these people. I'm sure for them, just one thing on top of another, on top of another. And
It's not
I
going
think
their way.
it's probably going to take at least 30 days for them to even start the process and start that healing process that they're going to need. Yeah, so our hearts certainly go out to them. We will continue to do everything that we can. We have relationships with, certain properties. We have, the furniture connections. We have, a lot of these things that we know that we can help pull everything together for people. We just are in a little bit of a holding pattern at the moment until we get that insurance piece put in place.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And I was asking you before also, prior to the fires, was there a housing shortage in LA as well? Like, or
Yeah, they were short 337,000 homes before the fire, and then they
wow,
lost another 10,000 homes in the fire. So,
just made matters worse.
yes.
Right, right. Wow, that's incredible. It's really it was almost like a perfect storm of like, and I hear like that's it. Some say it's inevitable about California. Some say it's climate change. Some say, I mean, I'm not. I know nothing to comment or weigh in on it, but
Not the expert.
it really is crazy that there's not enough water, that they're unable to douse them and get them under control. It's just it's
A lot of it had to do with the winds, because normally they
the
attack
banana
a lot of
winds.
these areas by air. And with the winds being so high, they had to ground the planes. So just when, you thought that you might be able to get something under control, this, 75 mile an hour gust of wind comes through and, pushes it 10 miles down the forest. It's just been,
Yeah, no, for sure. And I heard there was reports they hadn't cleared the brush for years. And I mean, I think everyone's kind of still probably, especially California's had a rough go of it as a state, but I think everyone's probably still trying to figure themselves out and rebuild since COVID. And then, you have this kind of natural disaster. It's horrible. And our hearts go out to all the people that are, I'm a big football fan. There's not a single game that's not played without everybody doing a moment of silence. So, yeah, hopefully these people get their lives put back together and they find homes. And it's really wonderful to hear all the stuff that you guys are doing. To give you a little plug, if anyone is looking for an executive rental, is moving, I'll definitely be reaching out to you now that I know about you guys. And I know you guys operate with some condos down at the waterfront in downtown Toronto in the financial district. I've checked out in some great buildings. But I think it's a really great option. I was telling you a story about clients of mine who a few years ago in the height of COVID when things were selling like every day and, it was move everybody out and, have 7 days of showings all day long, all night long. And then you sold it at the end of the 8 days. And my clients didn't have any family in the city in Toronto that they could go stay with. And so they said, okay, we found an Airbnb nearby. They had a dog. It was even tougher. And you have a dog, I have a dog. We're all dog people, but it's very hard to find rentals when you have animals. And anyway, we find one, everything's good until 2 days before when they were like, the Airbnb just canceled. And I've heard that happen all like with no reason whatsoever. And what I hear is they'll get a request at a higher price and they'll just cancel. So knowing that there's companies like Avenue West that are out there that are run not by the individual homeowner, it's kind of, like Uber is Uber, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the driver. So it's the same idea, right? There's no one to call at Uber or Airbnb. It's just governed, you set your name up, and there's no real standards similar to you, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So you guys have the standards, you know what you're getting.
Exactly. And the standards are a key piece of why corporations continue to use us.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they know even though every one of our properties is different, they're individually owned, they have their own furnishings set up just specifically for that unit, but they know that the standard is going to be there. It's going to be clean. It's going to have, all the pieces that it should have, and everything's going to be working. And then if something unforeseen does happen, we're there to fix it and to be accountable for it and get it repaired as quickly as possible. So,
right. And I assume there's actually a live person and a phone number that someone can
yes.
call and contact. I think that's a big deal. If you just have an Uber and you're like an Airbnb and you're messaging that person via the app and that person decides, well, I have your money and you know what? I'm not coming to fix your stove. That's a big deal for an executive that just moved to a different city and needs to get to work and, doesn't have the time for that. So I think it's great. I'm so glad your team reached out to me. I love the insight into LA. Thank you so much for your, everything you guys are doing there to help people. And thank you for updating us on what's happening. We wish them all to have some peace and be sitting in their own homes very, very soon. And thank you for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Rachel, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank
If you're a
you.
football fan like me, enjoy. I'm so excited about football this weekend. Are you a football fan?
Oh, yes. We are very
Oh,
much
I guess you're a
active.
Broncos fan.
I am, but I'm also a New Orleans fan. I grew up in New Orleans,
Oh,
and
nice.
my son's middle name is Breeze. So we are definitely a diehard.
Listen, I have to tell you, I think your QB in Denver's.
Oh,
I
yes.
think
We're
he'll do.
very
I think he'll
excited.
do. Listen, I think he'll do. He'll have a good year next year.
I think that he will as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, enjoy the football and thank you so much. Have a great weekend.